Well, the other day I tried to do a demo on this side graft and I didn't do a very good job. I got in a hurry and distracted, and then I didn't have what I needed in frame. So I'm gonna give it another shot this morning and see how I make out. I was trying to show how to cut these signs and how to and point out where the cambium is. If I can get this camera just right, well, maybe that'll work right there. It looks pretty good. So I'm making slice about 1.5 inches long on that, and these cuts are angled so that when that flap opens up on the understock, that this sign just fits in there just ever so. Now I'm going to try and point out the cambium on this, and this cambium layer is, if I can see, get this in frame, cambium layer is a little tiny line. It's less than the width of a pencil mark. It's tiny, and it's not out here on the edge of the bark. It's down here. Okay, here's the edge of the bark. It's down here inside between the bark and the hardwood, and it's a one cell layer where all growing takes place. It's the definition of the cambium. And you know, when we were kids, people my age, we were taught in school that you could cut down a tree and count the rings and tell the age of the tree. And that cambium layer is what makes that ring every year. That's where all the growth is. So this little tiny line is just a, you know, it's minute, and that has to match up with the same tiny little line on the tree. And what happens is, in this cambium layer, it begins to produce calcium tissue, which is just undifferentiated cell growth. And if you ever see a tree that's been bumped and knocked a little place, or the bark's knocked off a little bit, or pruning cut, you'll see a ring around that cut and right in that cambium layer, and it builds up a ring of that calcium tissue, and that's healing tissue. So those are just undifferentiated cells. But if you connect this cambium with living cambium on a tree that's taking up nutrients, these cells will begin to differentiate into vascular cells, which sends energy to the bud and it starts to grow. Now the tree sending up nutrients causes the cambium to be active on the tree and begin to produce these calcing cells, or calcing tissue, and the stored carbohydrates in this sign wood also causes this end to begin to produce cells. And when those cells merge, that's where you get the vascular system that allows it to take up nutrients from the understock up into this piece of wood and force this bud to grow. Now, I'm going to try to get my camera set up here so I can demonstrate the receiving slot for that. But I want to point out just how straight these cuts are. If you can see, that cut is just as flat as the blade of that knife, just as straight. That's what you need, is a nice straight cut, so you don't have any air pockets in there. And what happens if you most people starting out tend to make the mistake of holding the knife like this, and what happens is you scoop that cut, it'll scoop out like that. And I'll cut one wrong just to show you that, because if it scoops out, what you'll have when you insert this sign is an air pocket. You can see through there, and if that pocket happens to be where you're trying to touch this cambium on this with the cambium on the tree, you're done. It won't grow. And it has to be a tight fit and right up against that little tiny mark of cambium. So these cuts have to be straight. And in order to do that, you don't want to lay that knife down or stand it up so it scoops. I tell my guys, it's not an axe, so don't chop. It's a knife, and you want to slice. So you lay it down and make that slice. And you have to hold your arm and wrist. Your wrist can't move. That has to be rigid. And you shoot a line right through your arm and right out through your elbow. And I always tell these guys, when they're learning, just make believe that your mother-in-law is standing right there beside you, and you go, bam! Boy, just catch her right in the chops, you know, right in the chin. And you'll learn to make a straight cut. So I'm going to try and get this camera set up and see if I can demonstrate the slot on this side graft.